you changed after dinner.
I just threw on a different piece of knitwear.
Smart.
You know, I'm just making sure the stream is working.
Oh, so you didn't have to stop the stream altogether. You just had to delete that part. Oh, that's good.
Looks like we're up. Awesome. Excellent. Spotlight myself. Got it down on the last round. Hi, everybody. How was dinner? Thumbs up. Natasha, I'm letting everybody kind of come in and get settled. Takes people a few minutes. I'm sure people might be a little late today. And then I will introduce you to the group.
Perfect. Sounds good.
I can't see who said they love my glasses. Yeah, I got tired of contacts, you guys. Thank you. It was time to get serious for the end of the evening, right? Right on the West Coast, it is earlier, so just snack time. I might have just eaten too much and now I'm going to get tired. Oh, that's cool, Jenny. If you raise your hand, Jenny, maybe I can see you, or if you're wearing them right now. If you raise your virtual hand, you'll come to the top and I'll be able to see you. How's knitting going for everybody? I saw some complaints that people weren't getting as much knitting done as they had thought that they were going to. Sorry about that. Apologize. So right now, tonight, we have my friend and amazing worker for the food bank of the Southern Tier joining us. Thank you, Nicole, for highlighting Natasha. And Natasha, we met quite a few years ago now, I would say. But this summer, or I guess it was the springtime, as my daughter got kicked home for the rest of her semester at college. And then her semester was finishing up. And I realized that if she did not have an experience for the summer, that it was going to affect my life negatively. I reached out to Natasha because it's all about me. I reached out to Natasha and was like, do you have anything that Bella can do at the food bank? I will pay her like as a donation to the food bank if you have some kind of job that she can do. And that turned out to be offensive to my daughter. Like, mom shouldn't do that. Whatever. But Natasha was able to set up an AmeriCorps position for Bella with the food bank of the Southern Tier, doing intake for people in our area who are experiencing food insecurity and hunger. And so I spent my entire summer listening to Bella on the phone in her bedroom upstairs from my studio, basically doing intake and registering people to get food. And it woke me up right away to the issue of food insecurity and hunger in my own area, which I guess I had my head under a rock, but I was not aware of the huge issue that it is. So I just want to pass things over to you, Natasha, and let you introduce yourself and say what you do. And one question that came up earlier, we'd love you to address, is what the difference between food insecurity and hunger is, because I couldn't even quite speak to that. And I bet you can.
That's a good question.
On the spot.
No, that's a good question. And I'm open to any questions people might have. So if you have a question, pop it in the chat and I'll do my best to answer it. But first, I just want to say thank you all for participating in this incredible event. And thanks to the brilliance of Laura Nelkin's brain for coming up with this idea. And it's just been incredible to see day after day just how much you guys are raising for this issue, which has been near and dear to my heart. My name is Natasha Thompson. I'm the president and CEO of the Food Bank of the Southern Tier. There's a question, where is the Southern Tier? That is the Southern Tier of New York State, right near the Pennsylvania border. So we serve 6 counties here in the Southern Tier. It's about 4,000 square miles of mostly rural communities and about 500,000 people. And I've been at this food bank. I just celebrated my 20th year. And prior to that, I worked at the Rhode Island Community Food Bank for 3 years. That's where I'm from, the great state of Rhode Island. And this has been a passion of mine. It's been my life's work. And it's just incredible. One of the best things that I've enjoyed of being a part of the food bank and the work to end hunger is really engaging with the community in different ways and working with the volunteers that support this work, working with the donors, and then meeting the people that we get to help and knowing that we're making a difference in people's lives, right? So food banks, essentially operate as central warehouses. We solicit, store, and distribute donations of food, large quantities, right? So when people think of hunger relief and food banks, they might think of a food pantry in their church basement. That's not us. We are a 65,000 square foot warehouse with, tractor trailers driving food all over the place. And, we act as kind of like the central clearinghouse for food, and we provide food to the smaller organizations, the pantries, the soup kitchens, any nonprofit organization that provides food to people in need can get food from the food bank. And most of our food comes from national sources, from food manufacturers, food warehouses, farmers, and we're talking large scale donations. So one of the things that's really cool about food banks is we can leverage a dollar tremendously. So for our food bank, for every dollar that's donated, we can distribute 3 meals to people in need because we're getting a majority of our food donated. So that's sort of a very brief description of how we operate. So we provide food to a network of community-based organizations who then provide food directly to people in need. This past year with COVID, just everything changed, and there was no playbook. There was no blueprint for how to respond during a global pandemic. We've addressed increases in demand due to natural disasters. We've had flooding in this region, for example, and we've had to really quickly mobilize to get food to communities that have been hit by floods. But we've never had this kind of thing impact the whole country, and every food bank across the country was impacted by COVID. And so we really had to shift the way that we operated. And, we transitioned away from, having people come in directly to get food to doing these large scale drive-throughs, which a lot of you probably saw on TV, where we had to get volunteers mobilized quickly with masks, people registered, which is what Laura's daughter helped us do, is register people on the phone so we knew how many people to expect. And every day, well, twice a week, we were doing these large-scale drive-through distributions that served 500 households every time. And we did those in 10 different locations across the region, and just tried to get as much food as we could out into the community as quickly as possible and as safely as possible. And so last year, we increased our distribution by about 40%. So all told, we distributed about 17.5 million pounds of food in 2020, which is wild. And we served about 30% more people than we did the year before. And that's not unique. That you see those numbers all across the country, and it was really incredible. The difference between hunger and food insecurity, right? So when we talk about food insecurity in the United States, what we really mean is that at any given time throughout the course of the year, a household may or may not have enough of their own resources to provide every member of the household with enough food, nutritionally appropriate, culturally appropriate food to meet their needs. And that might not be a consistent state. It could be that at the beginning of the month, people are good. but then towards the end of the month, as benefits run out, they're not good. Or if they have seasonal employment, for example, if they work in a place where they're, they're relying on tourism, we have a community like that here called Watkins Glen, very tourism reliant in the summertime. People are good. In the wintertime, they struggle. Right. And so that's really, when we talk about food insecurity, it's sort of like this inconsistent ability to access food. And that happened during the pandemic. We saw that during the pandemic, a majority of the people that came to us for assistance, 40% of them had never reached out for help before this past year. They were brand new to the system. They'd never needed to access a pantry or a meal program. And, because of the pandemic, they had to. And we were really happy to be able to provide them with that assistance. That's what food banks are for. We're here for people when they need us. And that's really a very common situation for many people prior to the pandemic in our nation. And then now, because of the pandemic, that's been exacerbated significantly. So I'm trying not to take up too much time.
No, you're doing great.
But just to give you and we're different from Feeding America. I know you guys are supporting Feeding America with this event. So we are members of Feeding America. We're one of 200 food banks across the country, and that are Feeding America affiliates, and Feeding America provides us with a tremendous amount of support. And so I'm always excited when people are doing good things for food banks, doing good things to help, the issue of hunger and food insecurity. And all the organizations that you guys are supporting with this event are some of my favorite organizations and do really incredible work and, address the problem of hunger and food insecurity from different perspectives.
So one person was saying, so what is hunger? Hunger is when you are food insecure all the time. Basically, you're hungry.
Yeah, hunger is more. Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, so hunger is more consistent, right? So hunger is it's your dominant state. It's prevalent. So you're hungry. You're experiencing hunger more often than you're not. And in the United States, we have more food insecurity is more prevalent than hunger is. But hunger becomes kind of like this catchphrase, and it's a shorthand for what we're talking about. But if you sort of get a little bit more wonky into it, you talk about food insecurity, which is more situational.
Another question I saw was about Mackenzie Bezos donated a lot to food banks. Yes. Do you know anything about that and how that played out for a food bank of the Southern Tier or?
Yeah, we did not get funding from Mackenzie Scott. Some of our colleagues, usually in larger metro areas or in certain communities in the South, received donations from Mackenzie Scott directly. I know Mackenzie Scott did give a significant donation to Feeding America, and I know that Feeding America took a majority of that donation and they set up a fund for food equity. And they're trying to put together kind of the plan for how that's going to roll out into the community. But, one of the things that, the pandemic highlighted was really just the disparities that already existed in our communities, right? Especially around food access and who has access to food and who doesn't. And it definitely highlighted the disparities among different racial communities. And so that was something that Feeding America is trying to address. And I think they used a significant portion of the Mackenzie Scott donation to set that up. So that's an exciting development. Yeah.
Yeah. So the last question I read here is, so you give money to food banks, and then on top of that, you also were doing those individual donations to families as well.
Yeah, so that's a great question. Thank you. So typically the way that we operate is a majority of our food goes out to our network of member agencies, our pantries and our soup kitchens and that kind of thing. We have had a program called the Mobile Food Pantry Program where we would bring the truck out into mostly rural communities that either didn't have a pantry or had a pantry that was only open once a month that was really small. And that's where basically we brought a truck into a community and offloaded the food, and then people went around horseshoe style and picked that food, right? We couldn't do that anymore because people couldn't stand in line. We didn't want to, put anyone in harm's way or expose them to COVID. So we transitioned those to these drive-throughs. Also understanding that many of our pantries had to close temporarily while they figured out how they were going to, switch up their operations to be able to keep their volunteers and their clients safe. So yeah, so we increased our distribution to individuals significantly during COVID because we had to. And that ran pretty much all the way through to September. And then in the fall, we've gradually transitioned back to smaller mobile food pantry distributions as well. So
great. I keep reading that money goes much further to food banks than food drives. Do you discourage food drives, i.e. dropping off cans at schools and churches?
Yeah, so food drives are really a great awareness builder. I think a lot of us have participated in food drives, but in terms of, what percentage of our total distribution is comprised of donated food, it's not a lot. So for us, it's about 5%. And the reality is that, your dollar donation can go much further at the food bank than your can of food, because I can get about 60% of the food that I get from the food bank through the food bank is donated. So we're just paying for the transportation to bring that food from wherever the point of origin is to our facility in Elmira. So it's much less than what you can go out to the grocery store and purchase. So if you want your donation to go further, I always recommend donating money, but I do understand that people like the awareness building, especially if you're trying to get kids involved or aware of the issue of hunger and food insecurity. A food drive is a good thing. Or if you're organizing a food drive for your specific local organization, like your local food pantry, and they need something specific, like they want to do a tuna fish drive, then that can be beneficial.
How do people qualify for assistance from the food bank?
So typically, the standard income guidelines are that your family income needs to be at or below 185% of the federal poverty level. And I don't know what that is off the top of my head, but that's pretty easy to Google. But during COVID times, that was all suspended. It was basically if someone presented themselves in need of food, we gave them food just because we wanted to open it up and eliminate the stigma, I think, because there are still many people that feel a certain stigma associated with asking for help. And so, but typically in normal times, it's 185% of the federal poverty level.
Right. Well, hopefully, I guess we're going to get back to normal times soon, right? Mm-hmm. That's the goal. So Natasha, I feel like we could have given everybody more time, but we have someone already locked and loaded for our next session. So good. I want to thank you so much for joining us this evening. You're welcome to hang out and knit. We're going to have knitting rooms later, and it's Sunday night on Zoom. And thank you so much. And also I wanted to just do a quick update because I forgot at the very beginning to say where we're at. We're at $258,000, 864, and we have 2 hours and 12 minutes to go. So don't stop being loud. There might be somebody who's putting it off till the last minute. It's amazing. It's totally phenomenal.
You guys are awesome. Knitters are awesome. I love you guys.
Knitters are awesome. And Natasha is one of the first people where I was like, I have an idea. Can I bounce this off of you? And she hooked me up with Hannah, who wasn't able to make it today, from Feeding America, to kind of bounce my idea off somebody who's in fundraising. And from that is how I decided to go the route that we went. But you were my first person that I pitched my idea to.
It's a great idea.
Thank you so much, Natasha. I'll see you soon.
Thank you.
We're going to go axe throwing together. That's the first thing I'm doing when my vaccine is done. Awesome. Do we have Bristol already? Do we see Bristol in the house?
Hello.
Hello. How are you?
I'm doing all right. How are y'all doing today?
We're
I was very
great.
southern there for a minute. I'm sorry about that.
Okay. I think
I'm in
everybody's
Maine,
getting
I
a
can't.
little tired.
Yeah.
They danced too hard earlier with
I
Casey.
know. Casey does that to me every week. Afternoon is
It's
fully
so
worth
good.
it.
So good. So this is my friend Bristol Ivy. I can't wait till we get to hug again. We've gotten close this year, even though we're far away. And Bristol is a brioche goddess and wonder. And I feel like brioche, I can pretty much put a spin on anything because I'm like that, but brioche food makes sense. It's within the theme. So Bristol, right?
I have to tell, can I tell you a story?
Yes.
So one time I rocked up to the movie theater and I pulled in beside this car and I was like, is that? It is. And the license plate was brioche. And I was like, don't actually care if it's food or knitting, marry me. Could not find that person. I really, really wish at some point that I could meet the person whose license plate was brioche.
That's good. Someone's license plate is brioche for sure.
Yes.
It could be you. Was that a Maine license plate though?
It was a Maine license plate.
Yeah. So you'd have to do brioche KN or something. Right?
Yeah.
So Bristol's going to do a little demo and then we'll do some Q&A with Bristol, and I'll do the same thing where I won't be spotlighted, but I'll read the Q&A and let you know the questions. So
Awesome.
I'm going to give you sharing.
Oh, fabulous. Thank you.
Yeah. And I'm going to de-spotlight myself.
Woo-hoo.
One day I'm not going to have to talk it out as I'm doing those actions.
No, that's never going to happen. Let's be serious here. Technology is never going to get to the point where we're not like monologuing everything we do.
Right.
As we
The
do
whole
it. So,
experience.
speaking of, I'm going to share my overhead camera. Hi, everybody. My name is Bristol. I go by she, her pronouns, and I live in Bangor, Maine. And I am so thrilled to be able to be with you here tonight. This is such an incredible situation. And like, y'all are just blowing my mind, and getting to be here for the last 15 minutes and listen to Natasha talk. Like, it's kind of hard to follow that up, but I'm going to try by talking about how cool brioche is. Because it is actually really cool. And I know a lot of people have scary memories and feelings and maybe some trauma associated with brioche, because here's the thing about brioche. It doesn't act like anything else in knitting does, right? The way that we look at it on our needles and the way that we look at the pattern itself has very little relation to what we understand knitting to be. So one of my absolute favorite ways to kind of understand what's going on with brioche is to creep up on it. And I do that by starting with just basic 1x1 rib. From there, we're going to go into another stitch pattern that looks a lot like brioche and wildly enough creates the exact same stitch pattern, does so in a very different manner. Because this is the really cool thing about knitting, right? Is the fact that, you know, thousands and thousands of miles apart, people are creating the same fabric. They might have started it knitting a certain way, like maybe you started throwing your yarn in the opposite direction and knitting through the back loop. It still produces the same thing. And that's just the stinking coolest thing about knitting. I absolutely love it. So the reason why I start with 1x1 rib is because everything in brioche is based on a binary, okay? Everything is based on a binary of one knit column, one purl column, one knit column, one purl column. So starting off with 1x1 rib gives us an idea of like, okay, low, this is a knit column, low, this is a purl column. That helps us kind of get into the rhythm of what's going on. Most of the time, you will not start a pattern in 1x1 rib and go into brioche. Most of the time, we just dive straight in on brioche. But if we're actually trying to understand the structure of what's going on, this is a really, really great way to get there. So from that 1x1 rib, what we're going to do is we're going to transfer into fisherman's rib. Okay, and fisherman's rib, believe it or not, is exactly the same stitch structure as brioche is, just done very, very differently. Okay, and again, created thousands and thousands of miles apart, exact same stitch structure. How cool is that? The thing about fisherman's rib, though, is that it more exactly mimics what we understand knitting to be and how we understand the mechanics of knitting. Okay, so the main thing that we see that's different on fisherman's rib than it is on 1x1 rib is that instead of doing just a normal knit one, okay, where we would go into the stitch on the needle, what we're going to do instead is we're going to do a knit one below. Okay, so that comes in, and I apologize to everyone who's knitting. I'm messing up by saying things like knit, purl, knit, purl. Sorry about that. So where we're going to go is straight through the center of the stitch below the one that's on the needle. So if you think about your knitting columns as a genealogy, what the current stitch on your needle is the daughter stitch. Below that is the mother stitch, grandmother, great-grandmother, great-great-grandmother, all the way down. We want to go in through the center of the mother stitch. And someone very graphically and accurately described this as stabbing mother in the stomach, which not so awesome, but really good metaphor for what we're doing because we want to go straight through the center of that stitch. We purl one normally, knit one below. Purl one normally, knit one below. What happens when we knit one below is that the daughter stitch that's currently on the needle collapses down on top of the mother stitch. And you end up doing what is basically a vertical knit two together. It's a tuck stitch. So if you've ever heard of anything referred to as a tuck stitch, it's this guy right here. What that does is it creates a structure in our fabric that is kind of wild. And we do that again, just normal purls on the purl columns, knit one below on the knit columns. Normal purl, knit one below. So I'm going to show you, in the interest of time, here's one I prepared earlier. The basic structure that we end up with, this starts with 1x1 rib, the basic structure that we end up with looks like this. Okay, when I spread that open, those diagonals that you see how there's those little diagonals coming over the top of the knit stitch and kind of arcing down like a little rainbow? That's the daughter stitch coming down and sitting down on top of the mother stitch. So the basic structure of both brioche and fisherman's rib depends on that vertical compression. Okay. How's everyone feeling so far? Is that making sense? So some people be like, "Ee." Okay, let me go.
I see a lot of people not knitting right now. I see a lot of like very intent faces.
Come knit with Bristol, it'll be fun and approachable. Oh God, what's happening? Yeah. But the really cool thing is that you start to produce a fabric that is super elastic. It's super poofy and squishy and delicious and holds warm air like nobody's business. It is one of the warmest stitch patterns out there. And I've been teaching this weekend for Knit Social, which is a company out of Vancouver. And they had me teach brioche last April as well, or this past April, excuse me. Wait, no, it is April right now. So that would have been February. Time has no meaning in the pandemic right now. So we're just going to go with at some point in the recent past. And I was making a joke that like, you don't really need brioche and fisherman's rib because it's in like worsted weight or bulky weight or anything like that, because it's never that cold. But then I had people from inside the Arctic Circle tell me that it was negative 40 degrees. I was like, okay, no, you get it. You get brioche and worsted weight yarn. You need that warmth. I don't need that warmth. But what starts to develop is that compressed stitch pattern and that really interesting texture with that fisherman's rib. When we look down bird's eye view at our knitting, even though we're doing kind of a weird thing, right, with that fisherman's rib, with that knit one below, it still looks like normative knitting on our needles. Yeah, it still looks like our 1x1 rib. You wouldn't know unless you looked at the fabric itself that I had switched pattern. Here's where brioche and fisherman's rib start to diverge. Okay, I'm going to finish this row and then I want to use my amazing, amazing drawing skills to show you what's going on with our fabric when we do this. So show of hands while I finish this row, who has given brioche a try before? How's it gone? A lot of like, meh. Yeah, it's not the most approachable stitch pattern, which is why we named this briocheable approachable, or approachable briocheable, one of those two. So when we look at the structure of ordinary knitting, like just basic stockinette, basic 1x1 rib, what we see is that kind of very stereotypical kind of ramen noodle sine wave pattern that we're used to, right? If you rip out your knitting, you're going to have that. I've been using this yarn all weekend and you can see it's got that kind of nice ramen noodle kink to it. What this does is it comes together and interlinks with the row above and the row below. Okay, and it locks in place in four separate locations. It locks in place with the legs of the stitch above and with the head of the stitch below. Now, the really cool thing about fisherman's rib is that fisherman's rib uses this setup, okay? What we're doing when we do that knit one below is that we are taking, and again, sorry for my drawing skills, they're really terrible. This is why I'm a knitting designer and not an artist. One thing we do when we work that stitch pattern is that typically to make the structure, we knit into that daughter stitch, right? When we knit one below, when we come in and knit into the mother stitch, what happens is that we create that compressed structure. We drop that daughter stitch down on top of the mother stitch to create that overarching shape on top of the column. And we knit those two pieces together. So when you take a look, again, let's look at that stitch pattern. That arch that comes over the top of the knit stitch as we know it, that's the daughter stitch coming and sitting down on top of our fabric, okay? The big difference between fisherman's rib and brioche is that brioche skips the part where we make it look like normative knitting. And that's where it throws a lot of people for a loop. That was an unintentional pun. I'm my own best audience. No worries if anyone else laughed at that. Okay, so when we look at brioche on the needle, we look down at it in that bird's eye view and say, what the actual hell? With fisherman's rib, we still have that straight structure. We start with our fabric in that orientation that we're used to, and then we compress it down with the knit one below. With brioche, what we do is we set things up in the compressed format to begin with by slipping our mother stitch and putting a yarn over on top of it, which is the same exact piece of yarn as our daughter stitch. So that when we get to it on the following row, we can knit those two pieces together. Exact same stitch structure as the fisherman's rib. We've just taken out the bit that's recognizable as knitting, which Great job, us. So let's take a look at how that sets up. Does that make sense so far? Okay. And I think this is a reason why brioche is so hard to get at sometimes, because it really doesn't look like normal knitting. It doesn't look like it. And the words in the pattern don't look like normal knitting, because you see things called BRK, BRP, what the hell? BRK, brioche knit, BRP, brioche purl. The other big one you'll see is SL1YO. And what that is that setting us up in that compressed situation so that we can work it together on the next row. So the way that brioche works, and we have to do a setup row first, is we're going to, on our purl columns, do that SL1YO. Okay, we bring the yarn to the front, we slip our purl stitch purlwise, and we bring the yarn over the top of the needle to the back, creating a yarn over sitting on top of our slipped stitch. Okay, if we look at this in terms of the fisherman's rib, our slipped stitch is our mother stitch, our yarn over is our daughter stitch. Same exact pieces of fabric, just already set up compressed rather than putting it in knitting formation to start with. From there, we knit one normally, slip one yarn over on the purl columns, knit one normally, and this is my setup row. And what you'll begin to see as I do this is that we are no longer in normal knit structure. We have single stitch, double stitch, single stitch, double stitch, single stitch, double stitch, all the way across. That's setting it up so that we can work those double stitches together on the following row. One thing I particularly love about brioche, in opposition to fisherman's rib, is the fact that you only have to purl one time per row, which is really, really nice. I don't like purling. So let me just purl once per row, and it's this very last stitch. Every other purl column, every other purl stitch, you slip and you put a yarn over on top. With fisherman's rib, you work every single stitch as you go. You knit one below, purl one, knit one below, purl one, all the way across. With brioche, you only ever slip those purl columns. So on this side, we are in brioche proper. And what we'll do is on our purl columns, we're going to create that slip one yarn over so that we have a pair ready to go for the next row. And then here, we've got our slip one yarn over from our previous row, our slip stitch and our yarn over that we made on our previous row. What we're going to do now is exactly the same as working that knit one below. We're going to go in and knit the two pieces of that slip one yarn over together. And that's called our BRK, brioche knit. So it does the exact same thing. We're setting things up for the next row on our purl columns, and we're finishing things up from the previous row on our knit columns. Setting things up on our purl columns with that slip one yarn over, finishing things up on our knit columns from the previous row. So it can be really, really intimidating on paper, but once you kind of start to understand the structure of it, you can do magical, magical things with brioche. So I've got a couple pieces over here. I have a class that I do that is basically this times about 12 hours because I really like talking about brioche. And it starts with a basic count where you learn in the round and you learn flat and you learn two color. Then you get to start working with increases and decreases. And you get to start making really gorgeous patterns like that. And then you get to start working with two color flat and doing really cool stuff like this. And all of this, every single bit of this starts with this row. Slip one yarn over BRK. It starts with this structure. This is the building block that everything else comes from. So I hope that you are willing to give brioche another try. It's really, really fun. And I hope this maybe made it a tiny, tiny bit less terrifying going forward. All right, Laura, hit me.
All right, I'm ready for some questions. I saw that somebody asked if you could just replace fisherman's rib for brioche.
Yes, you can.
Is your gauge different on one
Your
than the
gauge
other?
Might be slightly different. So the thing with fisherman's rib, and this is like supreme dork territory, so let me know if this goes on too long. So when we do fisherman's rib, we have purls every other stitch, okay? And when we're doing brioche, we only ever slip those purl columns, right? With those yarn overs on the top. So what happens to a purl when we turn it around? It becomes a knit, right? So when we're doing that knit one below on the following row, what we are releasing as that daughter stitch was the purl stitch we created on the row before. Okay, so when we flip it over, that becomes the stitch that we then drop down onto the mother stitch. That means that all of our tension in fisherman's rib is based on our purl tension. All of our tension in brioche, especially one color brioche flat, is based on our knit tension and our yarn over tension. So isn't that wild? It's like total canary in the coal mine to like diagnose knit issues, or if you row out. And so for me, I'm a little bit of a loose purler. I have stopped rowing out for the most part, unless I want like really super huge needles. But it shows up for me in my brioche. My fisherman's rib is almost always looser than my brioche. And I used to think that was the case across the board, but it's different for everyone based on that purl tension.
Cool. So a lot of people asked about fixing mistakes in brioche.
Oh, yes. Yes, it is possible. It is 100% possible. Yeah, I love fixing mistakes in brioche because my response for a really long time when someone said, what do you do when you make a mistake in brioche, was like, don't make a mistake. But we're human. It's 2021. The world is a dumpster fire. Like, we're going to make mistakes in our brioche. I've been watching the chat throughout and like watching people make mistakes during Casey's Crafternoon because they were dancing. Yeah, we're going to make mistakes either for joyful reasons or for not joyful reasons. And it is totally, totally possible to fix brioche mistakes. Often you can fix them on the row as you're going forward. You'll find something that you did on the previous row. You can fix it. You can ladder down in brioche. You can cut brioche and graft it back into place. All of that is possible.
I will say that when I go to fix a brioche mistake, you have a very short video on fixing mistakes in fisherman's rib and brioche on YouTube. That is like my go-to. Just like I just go watch it and then I just go fix my mistake. And like every time I just have that tiny little refresher.
I've gotten so much better since that video.
Yeah, but so you can shoot it at some point if you felt like it, but it gets the point across completely.
Yes.
Like in like a kind of fast, I want to fix my mistake way.
Yes, totally.
So I've seen some people say, where is your class? And what I'll tell everybody is, you guys have links to Bristol's website, to Patty's website, to the Food Bank of America, or sorry, Feeding America Meals on Wheels on that schedule page, which you have a link to. And on Bristol's website is everything that she has. Also seen questions about,
I'm just going to say really quickly, the class is called Brioche from the Roots Up. And it's based on patterns. So you have, again, those patterns that I showed you, those are all for the class. So you have those, and then the patterns are written with not just how, but why you do what I do what you do, why you did. It's been a long weekend. Why we do what we do in brioche. So, and there's video tutorials and there's Zoom classes and all sorts of fun stuff. So yeah, we're having a really good time with it. I know I have some of my brioche students here today. So my God.
Yay. And then the last thing I saw is if somebody wanted a really easy, like first brioche pattern, what would you suggest?
So the one that I pretty continually recommend is called Waterborne. by Jacqueline Cieslak. Let me see if I can pull it up really quickly on Ravelry. I know that some people can't access Ravelry. I'm pretty sure that she has it on her website as well. So if you just search Jackie Cieslak, or Jacqueline Cieslak, it should come up. And what she's done is absolutely genius, because it's a 3-pattern pattern and it's a headband. So the first iteration of the headband is just straight one color brioche. Okay, just like I was demonstrating here. So you get it in your hands and you get a feel for it. The second headband pattern has a little bit of increasing and decreasing on it. So you start to learn how those increases and decreases work. Third one is like kabam, increases and decreases. So you have a ton more going on. And so you slowly kind of build your skills over the course of the pattern. And Jackie's amazing. So I would highly, highly recommend that pattern.
Perfect. Great. Thank you. Excellent. I'm looking to see if there's any more questions. I don't know if you've seen any that I missed.
I was just talking too much. Sorry. I thought I was going to be able to do the chat, but I was like, brioche, because it's just so cool, y'all. It's just the coolest stitch. My favorite thing in knitting is when we figure out we can do something that scared us, because that's just the best feeling ever.
It really is. So Lorraine just said we're at 259,844. It's hard to say numbers that are that big. So we're really close to rolling to 260, so we can have a little dance party in probably just a few minutes, I would say. I see a usable sampler for one pass brioche. I missed that question.
Okay. One pass brioche. This is like some King Wizard level brioching. That was my cat just wandering through. So when you're working 2-color brioche, typically what you have to do is you work across one side of your fabric with one color, and then you have to slide everything back and work across it with your other color. Okay, and there's lots of reasons for that. And I go into that in much larger detail in other venues. This is not the time or the place. But the really fun thing is, you know how you can knit color work with one yarn in each finger, or one yarn in each hand, excuse me? You can do that with brioche too. So you can work one color and the stitches with one color with one hand, and work one color with the other stitches in the other hand. It feels like you are Gandalf. It is the best feeling in the world to be able to do that. So I'm currently working on it just so that I can get a little bit more comfortable with it, but it is so much fun.
I want to try that.
Stay tuned for that.
I have a pattern brioche topper that's a super simple hat and bulky yarn, and that would be a great pattern just to try that with. That sounds really fun. I hate to cut you off, but I think we're past your time, and we have our next person locked and loaded. I hope you're going to keep hanging out with us for the evening and knitting. I know you've been on the computer a lot this weekend, so I'm sure
I'm
you're
gonna go
ready
get some
to
Chipotle. My husband just drops them off, so I'm gonna go eat.
Nice. Excellent. Thank you so much, Bristol. You're awesome.
Thank you so much for all of your amazing work that you're doing this weekend. This is so inspiring.
These guys are amazing. Next up, we have Ingrid Gomez.
It's not giving me the option to spotlight. There it is. Got it.
There we go.
False alarm.
Y'all,
Oh,
look what I'm wearing.
look at you wearing Twistle. I love it. That's awesome.
My Kairos, you say.
Oh, thank you. I'm honored.
From Lola's Choice. So I'm so thrilled to be here, Laura. I don't want to interrupt, like if you were going to do an introduction, or if I could just jump in.
I'm a little tired of talking, so you go for it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me on today. I know the knitting community is super generous, and I'm so excited to hear you have raised 260,000 almost. And that is incredibly generous. So thank you so much for Laura for putting this together, and to all the wonderful knitters here, everyone who's donated. This is super exciting and very much needed. So I am Ingrid Gomez. I am a knitter, and I'm also running for office to represent my district, District 21, which includes the neighborhoods of Corona, East Elmhurst, Jackson Heights, and Elmhurst. And if you have heard you've probably heard that this was the center of the epicenter of the pandemic. So in my community, which is a predominantly immigrant community, working class community, we had the highest number of deaths from COVID-19. We had thousands of people who fell sick with COVID, and thousands lost their jobs. During this pandemic, because so many people lost their jobs, many people were food insecure. So this was something that was truly, it truly hit home, right? Hit close to home. During the time of the pandemic, I was very fortunate to join other volunteers, other organizers in our community, and we got together. We decided to do a mutual aid network. And this mutual aid network, what we did was there was a central office, virtual office, who got requests from community members, what they needed, the kinds of foods they needed. And so we took down their names, their lists of food. We would shop for the food, and then we would deliver it to the homes of those who were homebound and sick. Many families, again, like I mentioned before, lost their jobs. And so there was a lot of hunger during those very dark months of the early part of the pandemic. So given that this community is made up of essential workers, these were people who were praised by our governor, by many others as essential. So we're talking about delivery workers, we're talking about supermarket workers, we're talking about taxi drivers and childcare providers. All these people who work very in close contact with the public. This is the reason why so many people got sick. And because they're earning mostly minimum wage, they are living in doubled up, tripled up apartments. And that's because the rents are incredibly high in this community. Even though it's a working class community, people are paying upwards of $1,700, $1,800 for a studio, and $2,000, $2,200 for a one bedroom. So this is incredibly expensive for essential workers who are just earning $15 an hour. So during those months of the earlier months of the pandemic, it was a real privilege to be able to help our community out, to be able to shop for even just essential things, personal care items that people were missing. And this was only possible because there were women. All of them were organized. All of the organizers were women who got together, saw the need in the community, and said, we have to do something about it. Sadly, though, there's still food insecurity in this community. We have many people who are still lining up outside of Queens Museum. I don't know if y'all know Queens Museum. It's right by the Flushing Meadows Corona Park. It's in the Flushing Meadows Corona Park. And so every week there is a wonderful organization that if y'all can donate to, I think that, you guys have been really generous, but this organization is called La Jornada, and they basically feed about 7,000 families a week. In my area, they feed about, I believe, 2,000 to 3,000 a week. And that, again, is because there's still a lot of need. Many people are partially employed. Many people are still struggling to pay back rent. And these are the folks, again, that were praised during this time, during the pandemic. So we are slowly beginning to build and to get back to what we were prior to the pandemic, but it's still very difficult for many families. I know that World Central Kitchen was actually one of the organizations that helped in our area. They were able to set up at local electeds offices. And again, many families were able to get pre-made food, really good quality food for the families here in Corona. So that's just a little bit about the work that I've been doing as part of the Corona Mutual Aid Network. And this work was done throughout Queens. It's not just Corona, but we were one of the pods, one of the the arm, so to speak, of a larger org, which is Queens Mutual Aid. And so again, this is a community that's still struggling, and thankfully, we are slowly building back up. But the issue of food insecurity, as you all probably know, is something that is not just happening here in this community, but it's happening all throughout our country, right? There are many people who are just getting by, and they are living paycheck to paycheck. And sometimes it's, choosing between buying a gallon of milk or paying for your diabetic medication, or paying for, whatever medication you need. So this is something really important. All the work that y'all are doing, by coming together, by being able to provide, generously to World Central Kitchen and Feeding America. And I think it's Team No Kid Hungry and Meals on Wheels America. I think that is incredibly, incredibly important as we still need your help, right? And I just want to thank you all so much. So just to say a little bit about my campaign, this is my first time running for office, and it's quite an interesting ride so far. We are doing really well. We've done really well in fundraising, and we're on the ballot. So our election is on June 22nd. And yeah, and I'm really excited to be a part of this. I wish I could have joined earlier. Sadly, I'm not even knitting these days. I'm just super busy. So I got to knit this beauty, right before it got too crazy with my campaign, and I love it. I was so addicted to this, Laura. Like I want to make another one. So
I would say that this year that Ingrid and I were friends on Facebook, right? And I was watching the work that Ingrid was doing as the pandemic hit in the Queens. And when the pandemic was really strong in the city, I was sending masks down there. Like you were wearing a mask I made when you were doing food deliveries, which when I was thinking about who could really speak and have a firsthand, there it is right there.
It is. I know it's
firsthand experience of the pandemic and food insecurity and hunger. You're the first person I thought of. And then when you had one of the people that you were bringing food to was a crocheter, and you reached out to me to see if I had yarn, and I put together a big box with like snacks and crochet yarn and extra hooks for her.
Oh my God, Laura, you're so kind. That knitter and crocheter is just it's an older woman who during the pandemic, she was sick, and she's sick with cancer, and she was recently separated from her spouse, and she didn't really have much money. So I told Laura about her situation. At one point, this lady said that she just didn't have money to buy food, so she ended up eating paper, which is the first time I've ever heard such a thing, and like it's really upsetting to even think about that she went through that. So when she reached out to me, she saw that I'm a knitter. She asked me, do you have any supplies? And I was gonna go ahead and send some stuff to her. And I thought of Laura, and Laura generously offered. And so that was just such a beautiful gesture. And thank you, Laura, for doing
Well, I mean, I'm not even bringing it up to say thanks, just that you were like really good at finding people with resources, and then knowing people who needed, and knowing that I was from my like very safe homestead in the middle of nowhere, really wanting to help,
Well,
because we're just so insulated up here, and watching what was happening, my heart was just breaking for you guys. So being able to in any way support felt really nice. So I thank you for speaking with us tonight.
Thank you so
I really appreciate it. I see that Patty wants to know how we know each other. We just met at Vogue Knitting Live. Ingrid was in a bunch of my classes. She made me this awesome little pottery bowl I use for beading at like a paint your own pottery class.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
I remember.
Sometimes we just meet people we know we click with, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that I've known you for so many years. I've been a part of your Lola's Kit Club. And I think, you know, all your designs bring me joy. They really do. They really make me happy every time I get a little package, and I'm like, oh, what's in here? And I always
Right?
look forward to the sweets, you know, and I just look forward to it every month. So there's something.
Excellent. Well, Maze, which is going out in a few weeks, is really good, and the treat is quite unique. So it's not toilet paper this time. I can only get away with that once.
I did use up the toilet paper. I gotta tell
Nice.
you.
Came in handy. That's great. Well, thank you again. And I think that we're gonna, we've got somebody else queued up next. I really appreciate you taking time with us,
No
Ingrid.
worries. Can I put in my chat my website? Is that
Oh,
okay?
people have been doing that all throughout,
Oh,
actually. And also they found the link to the organization you were talking about. So that got linked as well. And you're on the schedule page.
Amazing.
So people can
Thank
find you there. Thank you so much.
See you guys.
So great to hear what you're doing. Guys, next up, we got my buddy Gail Zucker. I had to be like, Gail, what's Gail's last name? Losing my brain. From She Shoots Sheep. And Gail is a photographer. She's done some photography for me in the past and many other knitwear designers, probably Patty and Bristol as well, right? I could say that. And you live in Connecticut? Excellent. So, Gail, we've known each other forever. I'm just going to pass the floor over to you. I'm assuming that you want me to give you sharing permissions.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. It's a little hard to hear you.
Oh, you know, I had this major technology breakdown like half an hour ago. So I had to reset up everything really fast. Can you hear me okay now?
It's a little faint.
Okay, hold on. Maybe I'll try a different way, and let's see if that's any better. Let's see.
While Gail's doing that, we're up to $260,000, 419. Nope, 469. And we've got two, let me refresh, I have to refresh it to get the time. One sec, so exciting. It's like our little telethon. We've got 1 hour and 29 minutes remaining.
Is this any better, Laura?
Yeah, actually.
Okay, I'm ditching my real good microphone and just, you know, it was just one of those after a million Zoom presentations this week. It just, my big, powerful office computer decided to just take a break. So that's fine. We're doing it from the laptop. As long as if you can hear me, that's great.
We can hear you. It's great to see you.
Shall we do it? Let's see, share the screen. That looks a little funny. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Awesome. So I am so thrilled to be part of this, and I feel like first you have like Bristol, I'm following Bristol Ivy doing this like lovely technical knitting presentation, and then Ingrid's talking about her commitment to ending hunger and the work she's doing, and I'm going to show you pretty pictures. So we all do what we can. I am a professional photographer. I do commercial and editorial work, but really a lot of my work is in the yarn and anything to do with yarn, wool, sheep, fashion, knitwear, ready to wear world, which is fabulous because I'm also a lifelong knitter. So I'm sort of marrying my profession, which started out as photojournalism and really storytelling photography, with my I love to knit lifelong hobby. So it's kind of great and it's really fun. And there's nothing I like better than sharing sheep shots. So my work appears in lots and lots of knitting books, and I do a lot of work for yarn companies. And for those of you who remember that story where Laura had her daughter modeling and some photographer convinced a whole gymnastic team to do flips over her head in Times Square. That was me.
Hey, Gail, just so you know, your software is not full screen, so we can see all of your controls.
Oh,
I
good.
thought you
Lord.
would want to know that.
You know, I don't think I can make it go full screen. The last time I tried to do that, I mean, I'll try.
I just wanted you to know.
Well, I don't care if you see my controls, if you guys
Okay.
don't mind. But I
Okay.
mean, okay, we can try this, but on Friday, okay, let's see. Is this gonna, so right now there's a picture of books.
Yeah.
Did the picture change?
No.
See, that's it.
Okay.
So we're gonna,
It's just books.
what? Yeah. So we're gonna go back to you seeing my controls.
Okay.
Oh, good Lord.
Technology. I'm sorry.
Okay. Hopefully we can get out of that. There we go.
Yeah.
Anyways, so while I was still working as a photojournalist, I was shooting for the New York Times and lots of different magazines, like TV Guide and Coastal Living and Newsweek and Parade. And because I live in New England, I'd get assigned to photograph on sheep farms. And it was kind of like a real macho world of photojournalism. So I would never tell anybody I was a knitter. But of course, I loved getting assigned to sheep farms to do like travel stories about pretty New England. And I sort of facetiously started this portfolio that I called She Shoots Sheep Shots. And then when I started a blog in the early 2000s, I used the same name for it because I never thought I'd have to say it out loud. And, but you know how in life, one thing leads to another. And in 2000, the sort of late 2000s, I had an opportunity to, everything is just going haywire today. I had an opportunity to pitch a book to a book agent. And I suggested that we do a book that was about sheep farms and knitting. And we got a lovely contract to travel all over the country and stay on fiber farms. It was called Sheer Spirit, a visit to 10 fiber farms around the country. I'm mangling the title, but anyways, because of that, I had this great privilege of moving in on farmers and ranchers and staying with them so I could sort of show what their life was like and show what it was like to choose to raise fiber animals and for various reasons. So this is not a sheep, this is an alpaca in New Mexico. And, you know, one of the things I like to do is kind of get Riley right in close and try to show you what it feels like to be somewhere, not just like a picture of an animal at a distance. So this was like at the end of the day when she'd open the corral to let the alpaca back in for their evening feeding. And they just like this like wall of alpaca would come rushing in every day. And I got to meet the people who were living the dream, which I will report is really, really, really hard work. But it was such a privilege. This is a mohair kid in Texas. I also learned that you can actually just move your ranch because this was Kai Ranch, which at the time was in Central Texas. And the woman who owned it, she actually they moved their whole ranch to the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains a couple of years ago. So it's like the same tribe of goats. So goats are called a tribe, not a flock, the same tribe of goats and everything. And she just moved her whole operation to a different part of the country. I don't know why, that just was mind blowing to me. Some of the places I went were just like I thought they'd look, like straight out of the movies. So this was 13 Mile Lamb and Wool in Montana, outside of Bozeman. And it's just breathtaking. And really, I just felt like I had stepped into, like Robert Redford was going to come over the mountain and come knitting with us. But one of the places that was, to me, the most remarkable experience and was so, I guess, different than I expected it was my visit to a Navajo reservation in northeastern Arizona, because we had wanted to include heritage sheep, a heritage sheep breed, and the one that we researched a whole bunch and thought would be really interesting to profile is churro sheep, which are historically a breed that's historically associated with the Navajo people. And the breed had become really intermixed over the 20th century, but in the late 1980s, early 1990s, there started to be a movement to try to find part churro sheep and crossbreed them and bring the breed back. And interestingly enough, it's kind of a great segue to the Knit-a-thon, because there's a terrible problem of food insecurity and on the Navajo reservation that I was at, and probably on many, but I'm not going to speak for it. But they had it's a real food desert, and it was I think close to a 2-hour drive before you could get to a supermarket. So one of the reasons that the people who are involved with wanting to bring the churro sheep back is not just as an economic option for the Navajo to raise the sheep for their fiber, but also because they're a great source of protein and food and could then be right on the reservation. So we, through the magic of really it was word of mouth, because it predated good internet and the reservation did not have the internet at the time. We connected with Jay Begay, who is a master weaver and sheep herder and sort of an old soul who's raising, very, very involved in getting the churro sheep breed fully back up to full speed and fully full breed. And he's also involved in the slow food movement globally, which I think is kind of cool. But we were visiting him about his sheep. And he's also a master weaver. He really sort of took on a lot of the traditional ways of his elders, which he was only like, I think around 30 years old when we visited him, but he just like on the inside was 80. So this is the driveway to his family's home on the reservation. And these are churro sheep out grazing. So the sense of space and the way the sheep lived there was so very different than New England, where I live. So in the morning, the sheep would be let out to graze. And I mean, they would go really, really far. And then getting close to dusk, Jay and his brother and sometimes some other family members would go out on horseback and on Jeep and round up the sheep and bring them back. This is a particular marking that's identified with churro sheep. It's a badger face, which I think is just, I don't know, I think it's cool looking. And they also had mohair goats on their ranch, and they sort of kept them. This is when before they were let out for the day, this would be the corral that they were in. And it just was so strikingly different in every way from, being in the Northeast part of the United States. His mom, who also was involved, everybody's hands-on with the operation. And then his aunt and uncle, who were, his aunt was a very, very well-known weaver. And those are rug swatches, which also to me, it just never crossed my mind that you'd make a rug swatch the same way you would make a knitting swatch. And so the rugs are woven with the churro wool. It's sort of a rougher wool. It's not usually used for clothing, although Jay's wool I thought felt really nice, but traditionally it's used for rugs, saddle blankets, even braided into different kinds of ropes and harnesses. So Jay does all his shearing by hand. And I have to say, like every single farm I went to, farm and ranch, all over the country, there was always this one cat that would sit right next to the shearer and like as if it were in charge. It's just so funny that it was like across all the different lives. That was true. That's, I mean, super patient, just hand shearing, snip by snip, every sheep as he went. And that's some of all his yarn is dyed by hand. Well, actually, he hand spins a lot of it and dyed it himself. And I think some of it is also spun in at a mill. And from there, so I have to say, had my big computer not crashed, I was hoping to share some photos of sheep that I've shot for the Hudson Valley Textile Project, which is the way there's watersheds, there's also fiber sheds. So it's a coalition of many, many, many different people somewhere on the spectrum, from I'm a sheep farmer to I use wool in my fine art projects and everything in between, in the Hudson Valley. And I know Cece was on earlier, and I have these great shots. If you ever drive by her farm at the end of the day, her Jacob sheep actually cross the road and traffic has to stop, and there's a Jacob sheep parade. And it's like the most fabulous thing, with like the sun going down in the background in the field. And she has this great big beautiful barn. So I know she invited people to come visit. I would take her up on it. The sheep are marvelous. But those pictures had to not be shared because I needed to like throw cords everywhere and reset up a second computer situation here. Next time, maybe. Anyways, I want to share some other sheep. These are some of, this is wool from Nash Island, Maine, which is a island off the coast of, a private island off the coast of down east Maine, which means it's pretty far up there. And it's made by Janie Estelle in her Starcroft fiber mill. And she only uses the sheep that live on Nash Island. That's some of the sheep on a particularly stormy day. So I met Janie a number of years ago. In fact, I was trying to find her when I was working on Sheer Spirit, but thanks to there being no internet where she lives, I just couldn't track her down. Like, I tried word of mouth, I tried everything, but it's a private island. The sheep live wild there. And the island is owned by a family. The sheep flock is sort of managed by Janie, or she co-manages the sheep with the family that owns the island, and then the whole clip goes to her, and that becomes her yarn for the year. So we happened to meet separately a couple years later, and I've been going up to help her with the annual roundup and shearing every year. So the rest of the pictures are for that, because I think they're some of the most astounding looking sheep that I've run across. And I think it's because they do live on these the main island is Nash Island, and then there's a small island called Little Nash, and then Flat Island, which is where the colored sheep are, the sheep with the fleeces that aren't white. So the original flock was started by a lighthouse keeper's daughter about 100 years ago, and she chose all white sheep because they were more highly valued at the time for their fleeces. So that flock has been kept purely white, and then the colored fleeces, so the grays and browns Moritz, are on Flat Island. And the only thing living on the island are like seagulls. So the sheep, when they see people who, Janie and Alfie, who owns the island, go out during lambing to try to make sure that everything's going okay in case any of the sheep get into distress. They're pretty self-serve with their lambing. And then in late May, early June, a group of people go out to round the sheep up. The sheep are quite shy and do not like readily run into a corral, and they need to be sheared and checked over. So they're just really amazingly gorgeous. Because they're never kept in a barn or a barnyard, their fleeces are like really clean. Janie says they're saltwater washed or washed in the fog washed is what she says. And their diet is mostly seaweed and then the wild irises that grow on the islands and grasses. So this is obviously after they've been rounded up, and they always look a little startled to find humans facing them. It's a lamb. So the sheep, when you come to the island, you normally don't see the sheep. I had like the privilege of sleeping over on the island, camping at the island one night with Janie. And at dawn, the sheep if you hide down, you can see it. They make a single file line and they walk the whole ridge from one end of the island to the other. But otherwise, you normally don't see them just hanging out. So the way the shearing goes when you do see them is a group of people meet at a dock at about dawn in the nearest part of the mainland. and head out on a couple of lobster boats to go to the island. The islands are, the closest one is about a mile out past the harbor, out to sea. And there's no like docks on the island, and there's no like boat service or anything that you think of when you think of the kind of islands you go to for vacations. So you get as close as you can in a lobster boat, and then you switch to a tiny rowboat, and in small groups of 3 get rowed out, along with every single thing you need for the day. So that means all the burlap bags you need to put the fleeces in, all the shearing equipment, all the food for lunch, all the layers of clothes, medical supplies to check on the sheep. They do it's not vaccination. I guess it is a vaccination, but it's in their mouth. I'm so focused on needle vaccinations this year, I can't think of the words. So everything you need is just rowed out. And then when you get to the island, you kind of, everyone just, you sort of jump out. You have to have boots on. And then this was one of the lambs that had been a bottle baby. So he was running around near the humans, and he was actually brought back to the mainland after lambing and then brought back to the island that day. So that's why he's hanging out on the rocky shore. The next step is rounding up the sheep. So everyone splits up into little teams of people, and you're given a little section of the island, and you crouch down in the grasses until there's a whistle for you to pop up and help circle the sheep and like become big and circle the sheep in. So like the fitter type people, like these people go to the periphery of the island and are chasing the sheep in from the outer edge. And as they come inwards, each group sort of pops up and raises their arms and runs towards the sheep. So that's them getting towards our section, you know, the middle-aged women crouching the closest to the end goal section. And that's the sheep sort of, at this point, they've been herded up to the ridge. And that's everybody just making themselves sort of into human moving wall, chasing them down towards the particular edge of the island where the corral is. And then it's like, to me, this is magic. This works every year. Alfie opens the corral door and they just all go running in because they've got this human wall chasing them. And then it's just, I wish that you could hear the soundtrack, because it's just like 100 sheep bang and all the lambs looking for their moms, super confused, and all these seagulls screaming because there's humans on the island. And the next step is to separate out all the lambs and run them into a separate pen so they can be checked over. And it's just, you know, basically like some people are standing in the corral with the sheep and the lambs, and other people are being handed lambs and they're running down this little hill and putting them in a separate corral. And it's kind of wonderful because it's like holding, you know, like a baby sheep. And they're super adorable. There they are, all penned in together. You know, most of them get fixed.
That's so cute.
I know.
Not
enjoying the moment, but they are so cute. But look, they spring away afterwards. It's okay. And then at that point, once the lambs have sort of been all accounted for and they get their squirt of vaccine and the males get clipped, then they get let go and they're like free to wander, but they don't wander because they're looking for their moms and they're super confused. So they're just like screaming, "Mom, mom, mom." And all the ewes and a couple of rams are in the pens waiting to be sheared. So the shearers and a group of people, mostly teenagers or younger people in their 20s, stay in that pen, and some people are shearing and some people are grabbing the sheep and bringing them over to the shearers. And it's 3 women or 4 women who do the shearing, and they are freaking phenomenal. They're just like all day in this position, taking the fleeces off. So as the fleeces come off, they get thrown onto the skirting table. And Janny is there and she kind of grades them as they come out. So if she grades them for hand spinning, they get thrown onto a bed sheet and just rolled up, you know, real quickly picked over on the skirting table and then rolled up. And if they're other grades, then they're stuffed into, that's picking the, mostly you're picking off little bits of seaweed and some poop that's in it. Nothing awful. And it's kind of really fun. It's kind of like an old fashioned quilting bee, like you stand around the skirting table all day just chatting. And then at the end of the day, the shorn sheep get loose and they're kind of weird and naked looking and run back. And the shearers, everybody pitches in and helps carry everything off the island, which now includes these great big bags of fleeces that all need to have the whole process reversed and taken back to the mainland. There's a really great potluck lunch in the middle, but I didn't share pictures of it. That's the end of the day. And that is my She Share Sheep Shot show, but I'm happy to answer questions. You can find me on Instagram as Gail Zucker, but make sure it's Gale, like the hurricane wind, Gail. I share a lot of pictures of knitwear and some sheep on my feed there. And I'm happy to answer any questions I can about photographing sheep. I'm really not a sheep expert. I'm kind of like a looking at sheep expert.
I know I did see a few questions in here that were more like, why do they sterilize the sheep? And I'm pretty sure that's to keep the population down.
Yeah, the island can only support a certain number. So yeah, absolutely. So they actually, they really have to control the breeding. So one of the things that happens at the end of the day is there's a couple of rams who are sheared, and then the rams get taken to another island where it's like the boys' island. So just some rams live on it. And then they eventually get taken back to live with the ewes at a time of year when it would be appropriate for them to be mating. And then they get to have their fun and be social.
Patty likes the idea of Boy Island. She's clearly a fan of Boy Island.
You know, when I first heard about it, I was like, oh, the poor rams. But you know, it's kind of like the it's kind of like the man cave for sheep.
Right? So funny. Any other questions? You guys can put them in the chat. I'm kind of seeing them as they come in and fielding them over to Gail. Any tips for us with our iPhones or our Android phones if we are at a sheep farm and we want to get a good shot of a sheep?
Yeah, sure. So so here is a bunch of, now one of the things you'll notice about my sheep shots is that I'm almost always like on eye level with them. So I always try to get down really low because you can really inadvertently start a stampede of sheep by being standing tall and walking towards them, and ask me how I know. So my advice is get down really, really low and stay very still. And you know, if you are trying to get close, do so very slowly, because if you look at the sheep's pupils, can you see how they're almost like rectangular looking? So sheep see almost 360 degrees. And I mean, just imagine how confusing that would be if you can see that kind of periphery and like something taller than you was walking towards you. So my advice is like, just be slow, gentle, and low. And also, I think when you shoot animals, when you photograph animals, when I say shoot, I really mean with a camera, let me just say, like being on their eye level or below them is kind of a cool perspective too. So,
Oh, that's really helpful to know. We had a Canon or Nikon question.
oh, like what? Like which?
What do you shoot with? Do you shoot with
Oh,
a Canon or a Nikon?
I happen to have a Nikon, but you know, they're both, I mean, honestly, it doesn't matter. They're both really good camera companies. And to be honest, if you have a pretty recent iPhone or Android phone, your lens and the pixels within it are probably better than either your Nikon or Canon from like, say, 7 years ago.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So the last question I could ask you actually links in with a question I just saw in the chat. Someone was asking for advice on shooting their knitwear. And if we want everybody to take a photo of what they knit in their 12 hours today to talk about how much money Knit for Food raised, do you have any tips for them for that photo for them to share?
Well, yeah. I mean, the best light for photographing knits is open shade. So, I usually say find a place where it's shady. And that could be in your house if you have a room that has mostly white walls and, just that there's light coming in from the window, not direct sunlight, because what happens is direct sunlight just creates like really harsh shadows on your knitting, which is, all those rows of stitches. And also there's so much luster and natural oils in natural fibers, but in acrylic fibers, there's other properties that reflect. So if you have like open shade, I usually, recommend that as the best thing.
Great. Thank you. Those are the good questions, you guys. I might have missed one or two questions because things were moving quickly there, but I think that I got to most of them. I so appreciate you sharing all of these. And I love that tip about being on their level. That makes so much sense to me.
Well, this was really fun. Thank you so much for having me. And
Oh.
I'm just like so thrilled to be part of it. It's such a cool thing going on today.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting for all of us. I thank you. I think we're all getting a little low in energy. Everybody isn't quite as jumpy as they were. So you guys, we have an hour left to the knit-a-thon. Exactly. Wow. How's your knitting coming along? I want to see everybody's knitting. Hold it up. Just get an idea how we're doing. I might actually have a hat by the end of tonight. I got past the hard part. Looking good. Making some progress. You're almost onto the foot there of that sock. That'll get a little easier. Excellent. So I think Helene said she needs to take a break from knitting. Totally understandable. So I think we're going to go into knitting rooms for a little while. I think I had 45 minutes blocked for knitting rooms. And then we're going to come back together. Oh, Helene's saying she started drinking and that's why she couldn't knit anymore. That's funny because at dinner, I was like, I'm not having a drink until this whole thing is over. There's no way. So I will split everybody into knitting rooms. If you don't want to go into the knitting rooms, you can take a break and come back and you'll be able to get back in at 9:45. We're going to come back together and I want to introduce everybody that was in the team with me that helped make this happen because this was not me alone. This was an effort by a lot of people. So we'll come back together at 9:45 and I'll introduce everybody to you. We'll go through some final questions. We'll watch that final countdown. I have some exciting news to share, and then I'm going to ask everybody to hold up their knitting and say goodbye, and we're going to try to get like a little video of that so everybody can see what everybody got done during the knit-a-thon. I know some people started at 8 and ended at 8 today, which is good for them to get it done early, but great for you guys that you're hanging in with me till the end, okay? I did just get a reminder, which I haven't done with any of the rooms, but I don't think it's been an issue, that we try to stay away from politics and religion in the breakout rooms, just so that nobody is offended. I know that Ingrid, who was on earlier, is running for office. She was really careful to not give any party affiliation. She just kind of mentioned that her work that she did in the pandemic led her to want to run for office, but I don't feel like that ended up being political in any strong way. I'm gonna rewatch it to see if there was something I missed. But when we go into the rooms, why don't I give you guys a prompt? Why don't you tell everybody what your favorite knitting notion is? Or something like that. And when you come back, I'll give you guys another prompt. Let's see how many people we have. I like to watch the dropping before I make the room count.